Welcome on GAM channel. Please subscribe, like, share and comment to get more videos. This video is about the history of Egypt from the ancient Egypt up to the 21st century. Egypt, officially the Arab Republic of Egypt, is a transcontinental country spanning the northeast corner of Africa and southwest corner of Asia via a land bridge formed by the Sinai Peninsula. It is bordered by the Mediterranean Sea to the north, the Gaza Strip of Palestine and Israel to the northeast, and the Red Sea to the east, Sudan the south, and Libya to the west. The Gulf of Aqaba in the northeast separates Egypt from Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Cairo is the capital and largest city of Egypt, while Alexandria, the second largest city, is an important industrial and tourist hub at the Mediterranean coast. At approximately 100 million inhabitants, Egypt is the 14th most populated country in the world. Ancient Egypt. By 5000 BC, the people of Egypt had begun farming. They also wove linen and made pottery. Later, they learned to use bronze. About 3200 BC, the Egyptians invented writing. The first Egyptian in history was King Menes, aka Narmer, who lived shortly before 3100 BC. At that time, Egypt was divided into northern and southern Egypt. About 3118, Menes managed to unite the two. He made Memphis his capital. Ancient Egypt was a highly organized society. The country was divided into 42 areas called nomes. Each was governed by a nomarch. The first period of Egyptian history, which ended in 2181 BC, is called the Old Kingdom. During it, the pharaohs built pyramids. The first pyramid, the Step Pyramid, was built by Zoser about 2665 BC. Others were built by the following pharaohs: Sneferu and Khufu. After about 1281 BC, Egypt split into parts, and there were civil wars between the rival areas. This period of civil disorder is called the First Intermediate Period, and it lasted until 2055 BC. Finally, Mentuhotep II succeeded in reuniting Egypt, and he founded the Middle Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom lasted until 1650 BC. Furthermore, the pharaohs carried out successful military campaigns and more pyramids were built. However, the Middle Kingdom was followed by the Second Intermediate Period. About 1650 BC, Palestinian people called the Hyksos seized power in northern Egypt. They ruled from the city of Avaris. However, native Egyptians continued to rule southern Egypt, and in 1550 BC they drove out the Hyksos and reunited Egypt. So began the New Kingdom. It lasted from 1550 to 1070 BC. Egypt controlled Nubia, the land to the south, and invaded Palestine and Syria. The New Kingdom collapsed in 1070 and gave way to another period of disunity. From this point, Egypt declined and never recovered its former glory. During the Third Intermediate Period, Egypt split in two halves, north and south. However, in 747 BC, kings from Nubia conquered Egypt and restored unity. Yet in 525 BC, the Persians conquered Egypt. Then in 332, Alexander the Great conquered it. After Alexander's death, his empire split in two parts. A Greek general called Ptolemy eventually took Egypt, and for about 300 years his Greek descendants ruled Egypt. However, in 30 BC, Egypt became a province of Roman Empire and ceased to be an independent kingdom. Meanwhile, a woman called Sobekneferu ruled Egypt around 1800 BC. Later, a woman named Hatshepsut ruled Egypt from 1479 up to 1458 BC. Another woman, Twosret, ruled Egypt from 1191 up to 1189 BC. However, the real end of ancient Egypt came with Christianity. Modern Egypt. In the 4th century, the Roman Empire split into two. Egypt was part of the eastern half known Byzantine Empire. However, in the 7th century, the Arabs conquered it. The Arabs invaded Egypt in 639, and by 642, all of Egypt was in their hands. It became part of an Islamic empire and was ruled by Baghdad. However, in 868, an administrator called Ahmed ibn Tulun declared Egypt independent, but independence did not last long. His son and successor was assassinated and rule from Baghdad was reimposed. Then in 969, Egypt was conquered by the Fatimids of Tunisia. The Fatimids ruled Egypt until 1171, and they built Cairo, which became the capital. However, in 1171, a Syrian named Salah ad-Din, known in the West as Saladin, became ruler of Egypt. He founded a dynasty called the Ayyubids, who ruled Egypt for nearly 8 years. Then in 1250, a man named Baybars seized power in Egypt. He and his successors were called the Mamluks, and they ruled Egypt until 1517. However, in 1517, Egypt was conquered by the Ottoman Turks. As long as Egypt paid taxes to the Ottomans, were content to let the Egyptians administer themselves. Nevertheless, the 17th and 18th centuries were ones of economic decline of Egypt, and in 1719, the country suffered a devastating outbreak of plague. Then in 1798, a French army led by Napoleon landed at Egypt. Napoleon defeated the Egyptians on land at the Battle of the Pyramids, but he was utterly defeated at sea by the British Navy. So Napoleon abandoned his army and left Egypt. Afterward, British and Ottoman forces defeated the French army and forced them to surrender. However, the French expedition led to a renewed interest in ancient Egypt in Europe. After the French left, there was a power struggle in Egypt. It was eventually won by Albanian mercenaries led by Muhammad Ali, who became the viceroy of Egypt. Ali tried to modernize Egypt and he built factories and shipyards. However, he died in 1849. In 1859, work began in the Suez Canal. It was built by the French engineer Ferdinand de Lesseps. Khedive Ismail carried on the policy of trying to modernize Egypt. In 1869, the Suez Canal was complete. In 1882, there was an uprising in Egypt. Worried about the investments in the Suez Canal, the British sent troops to occupy Egypt. In 1922, Britain recognized Egypt as an independent state. Yet the British still controlled the Egyptian communication system, its legal system, and its foreign policy. Then in 1942, German troops invaded Egypt, but they were repulsed by the British at the Battle of El Alamein. The last British troops were withdrawn from Egypt in 1947. In 1948, Egypt was defeated in a war with Israel. Farouk was blamed for the disaster, and in 1952, a group of army officers called the Free Officers staged a coup and forced Farouk to abdicate. The leader, General Naguib, became the leader of Egypt, but in 1954 he was replaced by Gamal Abdel Nasser. In 1956, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain, France, and Israel formed an alliance, and in October 1956, Israel invaded Sinai. Nasser introduced a socialist regime and moved Egypt closer to the Soviet Union. Egypt was defeated by the Israel in the Six-Day War of 1967, and Nasser died in 1970. He was replaced by Anwar Sadat, who reserved the discredited socialist policies and encouraged foreign investment. As a result, the Egyptian economy boomed. In 1978, Sadat made peace with Israel by the Camp David Agreement. However, he was assassinated by extremists in 1981 and was replaced by Hosni Mubarak. In the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, terrorist attacks in Egypt became numerous and severe and began to target Christian Copts, foreign tourists, and government officials. Human Rights Watch 2006 report on Egypt detailed serious human rights violations, including routine torture, arbitrary detentions, and trials before military and state security courts. Revolution 2011. On 25th January 2011, widespread protests began against Mubarak's government. On 11th February 2011, Mubarak resigned and fled Cairo. Jubilant celebrations broke out in Cairo's Tahrir Square at the news. The Egyptian military then assumed the power to govern. Mohammed Hussein Tantawi, chair of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, became de facto interim head of state. On 13 February 2011, the military dissolved the parliament and suspended the constitution. A constitutional referendum was held on 19th March 2011. On 28th November 2011, Egypt held its first parliamentary election since the previous regime had been in power. Turnout was high and there were no reports of major irregularities or violence. President Morsi. From 2012 to 2013, Mohamed Morsi was elected president on 24th June 2012. On 30th June 2012, Mohamed Morsi was sworn in as Egypt's president. On 22nd November 2012, President Morsi issued a temporary declaration immunizing his decrees from challenge and seeking to protect the work of the Constituent Assembly. Political crisis 2013. On 3rd July 2013, after a wave of public discontent with autocratic excesses of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood government, the military removed Morsi from office, dissolved the Shura Council, and installed a temporary interim government. On 4th July 2013, 68-year-old Chief Justice of the Supreme Constitutional Court of Egypt, Adli Mansour, was sworn in as acting president over the new government following the removal of Morsi. On 19th January 2014, the interim government instituted a new constitution following a referendum approved by the overwhelming majority of voters. President El-Sisi, 2014. On 26th March 2014, Field Marshal Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, Egyptian Defense Minister and Commander-in-Chief Egyptian Armed Forces, retired from the military, announcing he would stand as candidate in 2014 presidential election. The poll held between 26th and 28th May 2014 resulted in a landslide victory for El-Sisi. Sisi was sworn into office as president of Egypt on 8th June 2014. The Muslim Brotherhood and some liberal and secular activist group boycotted the vote. A new parliamentary election was held in December 2015, resulting in a landslide victory for pro-Sisi parties, which secured a strong majority in the newly formed House of Representatives. El-Sisi was re-elected in 2018, facing no serious opposition. The dispute between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam escalated in 2020. Egypt sees the dam as an existential threat, fearing that the dam will reduce the amount of water it receives from the Nile. In December 2020, final results of the parliamentary election confirmed a clear majority of the seats of Egypt's Nation's Future party, which strongly supports President El-Sisi. The party even increased its majority, partly because of new electoral rules. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.